In the heart of ancient Rome, during the reign of ruthless emperors, one man stood boldly to proclaim the name of Jesus Christ, John, the beloved apostle. Unlike his fellow apostles, who had already faced brutal deaths for their faith, John's unwavering testimony would bring him face to face with unimaginable persecution. Arrested for preaching the gospel, he was dragged before the Roman authorities and sentenced to a horrifying execution, death by boiling oil. Before the jeering crowds, soldiers prepared the cauldron, confident that this faithful servant of Christ would soon be silenced forever. But what unfolded shocked the empire and left even his enemies speechless. John was thrown into the boiling oil, yet he did not burn, he did not die. By the miraculous hand of God, he emerged alive, preserved as a living witness of Christ's power. Unable to kill him, the Romans exiled John to the barren island of Patmos, where he would later receive the visions that became the book of Revelation. Imagine this, a massive cauldron set over roaring flames, filled with boiling oil. The smell of burning smoke fills the air. Around it, Roman soldiers stand guard, their armor glinting in the firelight. Citizens gather whispering, waiting to see yet another gruesome execution. And at the center of it all stands a frail, elderly man, Apostle John, the last living disciple of Jesus Christ. The crowd expects screams. They expect his flesh to melt away the moment he is lowered into the oil. But what happens next is something no one could have imagined. John sits in the oil unharmed, as if resting in the presence of God himself. Soldiers stare in disbelief, the crowd gasps, and Rome's most terrifying punishment turns into one of the greatest testimonies of divine power ever recorded. Some dismiss this story as legend, but early church fathers wrote about it as fact. And if true, it is a miracle that not only saved John's life, but changed the course of Christian history forever. So how did John survive boiling oil before Roman soldiers? And why would God allow such a miracle to happen? Stay with me, because the answer is more powerful than you think. Setting the scene, Rome's brutality. To understand the weight of John's miracle, you must first understand the world he lived in. Rome was not a gentle empire. It was a machine of power, intimidation, and control. Its rulers knew that fear was the sharpest weapon to keep people obedient. And when it came to Christians, Rome's wrath was merciless. Under emperors like Nero and Domitian, Christians were considered enemies of the state, blamed for disasters, mocked in the arenas, and executed in the most horrific ways imaginable. Crucifixion wasn't just an execution, it was a spectacle of shame. Others were sewn into animal skins and thrown to wild beasts. Some were burned alive at night to light the emperor's gardens. So when the Roman authorities brought John forward, the last living apostle, they weren't just trying to kill a man, they were sending a message. This is what happens to those who defy Caesar. John wasn't simply another prisoner, he was a symbol. He was the living link to Jesus Christ, the one whose testimony could not be silenced. And the method chosen for his death, boiling oil. It was one of the most feared executions of the time. Flesh would blister, organs would fail, and death would be agonizing. The crowd gathered that day expected a horror show. They believed this would be the end of the man who had walked with Christ. But Rome, with all its cruelty, was about to face something it could not control, a power higher than emperors, stronger than soldiers, greater than fire or oil. What they thought would be John's end was only the beginning of a testimony that would shake the empire itself. Who was Apostle John at this time? Before we picture John being lowered into that boiling oil, we need to understand who he really was at this moment in history. John wasn't just another Christian leader. He was the last surviving apostle of Jesus Christ. By the time of his arrest, John was an old man, possibly in his 80s or 90s. Yet his influence was stronger than ever. Think about it, Peter had been crucified. Paul had been executed. Most of the apostles had already died as martyrs. But John remained. He was the last living eyewitness to the ministry of Jesus, the one who leaned on Christ's chest during the Last Supper, the one who stood at the foot of the cross when Jesus was crucified. His words carried unmatched authority because he wasn't repeating stories, he had lived them. By this time, John had already written the gospel that bears his name, along with letters that encouraged believers across the Roman Empire. He was a shepherd to the early church, a guiding light to thousands of Christians facing persecution. Rome feared him not because of swords or armies, but because of his testimony, a testimony that kept hope alive when fear was everywhere. For the empire, killing John wasn't just about silencing a man, it was about crushing the faith of a growing movement. They thought, if the last apostle dies in agony, perhaps his followers will give up. But John's survival would prove the opposite. God still had a mission for him, something so great that no emperor, no soldier, and no boiling oil could stop it. This sets the stage for one of the most dramatic moments in early church history. The day Rome tried to destroy John, but instead made him a living miracle. The moment of execution. The day finally came. The Roman soldiers prepared the execution site with cold precision. A massive cauldron was set over raging flames, filled with oil, until it bubbled and hissed like a living thing. The heat was unbearable even from a distance. Spectators crowded around, eager for the gruesome spectacle that Rome so often provided. Some came to mock, others came out of fear, but all expected the same ending, the slow, agonizing death of a man who dared to defy the empire. John, now aged and frail in appearance, was dragged forward. But unlike other prisoners who screamed, cursed, or begged for mercy, John remained calm. Perhaps the words of Jesus still echoed in his spirit. "Fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul." His face bore no panic, only a strange, steady peace. The commander gave the order. Soldiers seized him, and the crowd held its breath. As John was lowered into the cauldron, the oil boiled and splashed, and the fire roared louder beneath it. This should have been the moment of unbearable pain, of writhing flesh and horrifying screams. But instead, silence. John did not cry out. He did not burn. He did not even flinch. The soldiers stared in disbelief. The crowd began to murmur. Something was wrong. Something they had never seen before. John, sitting in boiling oil, looked as if he were untouched, protected by an invisible shield. For Rome, this execution was meant to be a warning. Instead, it became a testimony. The empire had prepared a public humiliation, but heaven turned it into a miracle. The cauldron of death became the stage for God's glory. Why didn't John die? The question everyone asks is simple: why? Why did God allow John to survive the boiling oil when so many other Christians faced brutal deaths? The answer lies not only in God's power, but also in his purpose. First, this was a testimony to the empire itself. Rome ruled with fear, showing the world that no one could resist its authority. Yet here was an old man, sitting untouched in boiling oil, proving that Caesar's power stopped where God's began. John's survival wasn't just about saving a life. It was about declaring, before soldiers and citizens alike, that heaven's authority outranks every empire. Second, God still had work for John to do. Unlike Peter and Paul, whose missions were complete, John's mission was unfinished. He was the one chosen to receive the revelation of Jesus Christ, the visions of heaven, the unveiling of the end times. If John had died in that cauldron, we would not have the book of Revelation today. His survival was a bridge to the greatest prophetic message of the New Testament. Third, John's miracle became a symbol for the church. Every believer under persecution could now look to his story and remember, God is able to preserve his people. Just as the Hebrew men walked out of the furnace without smelling of smoke, John walked out of boiling oil without a scar. His life became living proof that faith is stronger than fire, oil, or swords. John didn't die because his testimony wasn't finished. He lived because God wasn't done speaking through him, and in surviving he became a message himself. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. What happened afterward? When the soldiers realized John would not die, panic spread among them. Rome prided itself on control. Yet here was a public failure, a miracle witnessed by many. The Emperor Domitian, furious that his execution had turned into a testimony, decided on another punishment. If he could not kill John, he would silence him. And so John was banished to the small, rocky island of Patmos. Patmos was no paradise. It was a barren prison colony in the Aegean Sea, where criminals and exiles were left to suffer. Imagine the isolation, no crowds, no churches to lead, no brothers by his side. For many, this would have been a place of despair. But for John, Patmos became holy ground. What Rome meant for exile, God turned into revelation. It was there in solitude that John received visions of heaven itself. On that island, he was taken in the spirit and shown the throne of God, the Lamb who was slain, the final battle between good and evil, and the glory of the New Jerusalem, the book of Revelation. The final piece of the New Testament was born out of exile. Think about it. Had John died in boiling oil, the church would never have received the most powerful prophetic book in history. Instead, God used Rome's attempt at silencing him as the very platform to speak the loudest message of all time. What happened afterward proves a timeless truth. When man closes a door, God opens the heavens. Rome thought John's exile was his end, but it became his beginning. The oil could not kill him, the emperor could not silence him, and the island became his pulpit to the entire world. The hidden lesson for us today, the story of John in boiling oil, is not just a miracle of the past. It carries a powerful message for every believer today. You may never face a cauldron of oil or a Roman soldier, but you will face trials, challenges, and moments when it feels like the fire is too hot and the weight too heavy. John's survival is God's reminder that no trial has the power to end your story until he says it is finished. Think about it. John was the last apostle, the one Rome most wanted to silence. And yet God kept him alive because his assignment was not over. The same is true for you. If you are still breathing, your mission is still active. What the enemy designs to destroy you, God can transform into a platform for his glory. The boiling oil represents the pressures of life, illness, betrayal, poverty, persecution, rejection. Yet John's story tells us that the oil will not consume you. God has the power to keep you standing, untouched, even when the fire rages all around. Your greatest trial can become your greatest testimony. And notice this, John didn't just survive, he thrived. From exile came revelation. From persecution came prophecy. From silence came a voice that still echoes through history. The lesson is clear. God doesn't just deliver his people from trouble. He uses trouble to reveal his glory. So when you face your own boiling oil, remember John. Remember that survival is not by your strength, but by God's hand. If he preserved John for a divine purpose, he can and will preserve you too. Your trials are not the end. They are the stage for your testimony. The boiling oil was supposed to end John's life, but instead, it revealed God's power in the most dramatic way. What Rome planned as an execution became a miracle. What the emperor meant for silence became a voice that still speaks through the pages of Revelation today. John's survival reminds us that no weapon, no scheme, and no enemy can stop the plan of God in your life. And here's the truth for you. If God could keep John alive in boiling oil, then surely he can carry you through whatever fire you're facing right now. The oil didn't have the final word, God did. Your challenges don't define your destiny, God's purpose does. So the next time life feels overwhelming, remember John's testimony. Remember that trials are not always signs of defeat, but opportunities for God to show his glory. Do you believe God still works miracles like this today? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. And if this story has inspired you, make sure to like, subscribe, and join me for more hidden mysteries of the faith that will strengthen your spirit and open your eyes to the power of God.